What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dream Chasers Ground Zero. Today we have with us Bethany Finch. Bethany, would you just mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do? And then to follow that up, the story of your personal ground zero moment and what that has taught you to help you get to where you are today.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure being here and an opportunity to just give value back to your listeners, and I thank you for that. So I am Bethany Finch. I'm with American Made Home Solutions, and we've been 25 years in multifamily industry and real estate investing, and have built out 4 different businesses: credit hacking, short-term rental, and single-family renovation, and then multifamily syndications. So we do a bunch of different things, right? But our biggest thing that I am known for, I am what we like to say, the impact investor. So many times for us, it's about being a purpose-driven investor. And that is our new catchphrase, and we are going to own that category. So nobody else is allowed to take it. I think too many times as investors, people just do things just to do things. And I think if more of us were purpose-driven, the change that can be done within our own communities, that we can completely make America great again in a way that is dynamic, and we can be that superpower that everybody wants us to be. But it just takes more thought and more purpose. And so that's exactly what our company has focused on this whole time.
No, I love that. And I do also just want to point out to anybody tuned in right now that this will be the first interview we have had filmed from a Starbucks. So I just wanted to shout that out just a little bit. The adversity that she has come through just to, come on and share her experience with everybody today. But no, I love that. I think
Aaron, you may not know this. Do you know I'm 100% remote?
No, actually, I didn't know that.
Okay, so I don't think you knew. So I am 100% remote. In 2020, we pivoted the business. I traveled to all of our different markets that we're in, and just the teams saw me on a regular basis. But then when 2020 happened and the airlines started dictating stuff, and it started really just downplaying and putting clamps on everything. So I actually have a medical condition. It is actually dangerous for me to wear a mask. And so I've got a card, the whole works, and I flew through the entire COVID, never wearing a mask, going through all the airports the entire time, never once wearing a mask. And then in October, when a flight, a pilot left his seat, he was physically going to eject me, even though I had legal proof and evidence to be on there, and it didn't matter. At that point, my husband said, "We're done. We will not let anybody control our business. We will not let anybody control our teams. We're done." And so we had already been praying about it, and had already been talking about, being remote, but that solidified it in his mind. And at that point, we went 100% remote, and we've been remote. Originally, it was only 6 months, and then we ended up, it's a year and a half later, and we're still doing it. And so sometimes we are passing through tornadoes. We just had one 24 hours ago. Other times it's we're up on the side of a mountain, so the signal is not so good. So we're driving somewhere to make sure we have signal, like that. So, but it was more important to us to go to our teams. And when our team saw what we went through to get to them and to make sure we were still there for them, it's a huge turning point in our business, huge.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the story, and I love the adaptability that you guys have come from. Just, and being willing to change directions to make everything work. What was that kind of like I'm trying to think of how I want to word this, like to be in that moment and more or less decide to say, screw you to anybody who says otherwise. And the two of you just decide, like, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to make it work, and essentially you're going to like it.
So it's interesting that you say that. Aaron, you look young. So I don't know, you look young. I will have been married 30 years this year. So my husband and I, as most often are very opposite when it comes to risk and that kind of thing. My husband is Mr. Safety Liaison, right? He's not, I'm the risk taker. I'm the one that's gone skydiving multiple times and cliff jumping and race car driving. I mean, that's my world. That's not his world. And so I didn't have any problem not wearing a mask and standing up for all the other disabled people that couldn't, right? I'm like, no, I think God made sure I had to go through this because someone needs to stand up for them. And he was supportive of me. but he finally got to where he had to wear a mask because his anger and his temper would take the better of him. So I think at that point he knew enough about me to know that I would have gone toe to toe with that pilot. And at that point, when he looked over at me, he said, "This is the only time I'll ever ask you to do this." He said, "Put it on." And because he knew the risk it was to me, he says, "Put it on, and we will be making a huge change when we get off this plane." It like solidified it in his mind. It was a trigger point because of what he was asking me to do, because somebody else, right? And so for him, it was like backing someone up in a corner, and you don't realize that you're getting backed up. And although he didn't realize he was getting backed up, the moment he realized, and he literally looked at that pilot, he said, "You realize you're asking my wife to sacrifice her life, but you're not asking anybody else on this plane to do the same thing." And the pilot just looked at him and he said, "It's a good thing my wife is a Christian," he said. and he let it go at that. And he just said no. And so to make that decision for him, it was a no-brainer. But he had to get backed up to that point, right? He had to be there when people would confront us. He had to be there when they were belligerent and rude. And I wouldn't lose my temper and I wouldn't lose my calm, and I would jokingly make comments, and things like this. I mean, I was literally, by the governor of our own state, was called a murderer because I chose not to wear a mask. And it's like, they're not murdering me, but I'm murdering them. I mean, it was a simple word play, but in doing so, I was like, no, I'm not going to buy into that label. So when we're as business owners, so much of what we do, literally, we are doing or changing something that nobody else is doing or that nobody else sees. If we don't see it and we can't create that path or create that way, think about it. Band-Aids never would have been invented, or the cell phone never would have been, all these things, they came about because somebody said, no, there's got to be a way, and I'm going to figure it out, right? It might take me 100 tries, but I'll figure it out. So sometimes God just allows us to have those situations come up in our lives because he knows we're the ones that have to do it, and we need to get back to the corner. And it was the best thing, honestly. My husband didn't have the vision that I had. And so it allowed him to understand our company at a whole new level. And yes, there were very tough transition times, right? When you don't necessarily have water whenever you want it, right? If you didn't pack enough water, or we're not plugged in, or things like that. But in the same regard, it was a new adventure. It changed it up. It gave him some differences and some opportunities to think outside the box that in a normal, everyday, get up, go to your job, humdrum, you don't necessarily have those. So thankfully, he recognized it because he made the decision and it wasn't forced upon him. He embraced it in a different way. Not that every day is a great day, right? We still are humans and we still want our creature comforts and things of that nature. But, like today, he's like, wait, you got to go do what? When are you going to be back? Because it means, we're going in different directions and doing different things. So, but that's okay. And that's what entrepreneurs do. We just learn to communicate in a different way, have a different mindset, right? And make different choices.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm a firm believer in the like everything happens for a reason mentality, where I really have tried to start taking into effect like everything that is going on in my life and thinking about why it's happening. Like whether that be, an argument with a loved one, whether that be, some outside forces, whatever that thing may be, I try to look at it in a way that I can say, why is this happening to me right now? What am I supposed to be getting from this experience right now? And I've been able to look back. I mean, we all know, hindsight's 2020, but I've been able to look back and see different events that I can tell you, like, had one thing not happened, it would not have led to another thing, and it would not have led to another thing. I mean, and like this event right here, right now, is a direct representation of that, like where I wouldn't be had some other things gone a different way.
So if you think about it like that, let's step back. You had mentioned, what's your ground zero? What is your ground zero? What was a turning point in your business? So the interesting thing about one ground zero that I immediately thought of when you said that led to another ground zero, which 100% changed the entire trajectory of our business. So the one ground zero that I thought of when you asked me that was, it's 2 a.m. It's obviously the middle of the night. My family is at home sleeping, and I am upstairs in a single family home that we're flipping. I've just fired the 8th contractor. I've had no sleep in 2 days. I have a coaching call in 10 minutes, and I'm supposed to be on a plane in 2 more hours to go to a conference. So a multitude of things is going on, right? Obviously, I'm emotional wreck. I am laying on the floor bawling. It's like, what am I doing and why am I doing this, right? In the same regard, I had already scheduled that coaching call. I didn't schedule it 10 minutes ago. I had to plan that out, right? A week in advance. The reason it was a 5 a.m. call was 5 a.m. Eastern time. So I could get on the call because I also knew that was when they had availability and I knew I was going to get on a plane. So that was the only time I could work it in. So then I also knew I was going to be leaving to go to this conference. So I needed to keep busy on the flip, right? I needed to get this stuff done and take care of it. So if I'm laying there, I'm sucking it up. I'm trying to dry my eyes before I get on this call. The coach can clearly hear I had obviously been crying. She goes, okay, so I guess we're not talking about the curriculum today. What are we talking about today? Right? She had some grace with me, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I just told her. I said, "I just fired the 8th guy," and she's like, "And?" Not, "Oh, that's bad," right? She knew I didn't hear that. She's like, and every time she'd say and she was waiting for me to say what I was going to do about it or why I fired him, right? And so she was drawing me out, and as she drew me out, she said, "Bethany, you need to learn 2 things. First, you need to hire slowly and fire quickly." I'm like, well, clearly I got the firing quickly down. 8 guys, right? She goes, "But did you hire slowly?" And I'm like, "No, I'm desperately trying to get this flip done. I'm running out of time and this and that." She says, "Aha, see? So you only had part of it, not the other part of it." And I said, "Okay, fair enough." And so then on the flip side of it, the second thing she told me, "You're going to do myriads of deals." She said, 10% of every deal or 10% of all your deals in a year, you're going to bring money to the table on. Because at this point I was worried about losing money, right? And she said, 10% of all the deals you do in a year, you're going to bring money to the table on. Get it through your head. Babe Ruth is called the home run king. Not because every time he hits a bat, he hit a home run. He struck out more than anybody, right? But when we stop and think about it, he kept getting up and getting up and getting up and showing up and showing up and showing up. And eventually it caused him to feed the home run king. And so she said, you just need to keep getting up and keep getting up and keep getting up and keep getting up. But know in the back of your head, 10% of the time, you're going to lose money. It's not a bad thing. It's the way it is. Accept it and move on. And I'm like, I mean, the pressure that she just relieved was unbelievable for me. It was like, oh my word, okay, because all you hear about is all the successes and everybody's doing great and this and that. And I just felt like a failure. And she said, think about it. You're getting on a plane in 2 hours. You haven't slept in 2 days. Does that sound like a failure? I said, yeah, shouldn't I have had sleep and this and that? She said, absolutely not. Winners get up and do whatever it takes. And that's what you're doing. And I'm like, oh my, okay, sure enough. Okay. And that conference literally was one I'd already planned on. It was another training time again that I had set the time and made this event happen. And that training catapulted me getting more who's in my business to take some of the pressure off. I was setting up some systems and moving some things. I literally did my very first wholesale deal through technology, never meeting the seller, never meeting the buyer, never having interaction except through the computer, and 100% all through technology. I would never have done that had I not gone to that conference, had I not got there, showed up, done the work, implemented, right? And then in doing so, it pivoted my business because now I started asking better questions. Okay, so is there a way that I can do technology to do some of this? Is there a way that I could, so I set up systems in place. So I'm constantly have an influx of contractors all the time. So I can always find new contractors anytime I need them, right? Instead of being desperate, right? Fixing some of those broken things. But then because I did that and I automated and did a few things, it changed the trajectory of my business because it freed up my brain. So I could do more of the creative stuff that I needed to do and the negotiations and different things like that. So that later, let's see, that would have been 3 years later at that point. 3 years later, the nation's deadliest landslide happened to my neighbors. I lost 43 of my neighbors. A mile of the whole hillside collapsed the entire neighborhood. It was unbelievably devastating. But what was even more devastating was that I have EMT and search and rescue background training. So I immediately go out there. We're all trying to work together. It was absolute chaos. It was noise. It was unbelievable. People literally walking around in shock. One shoe on, one shoe off. One person was carrying a chandelier. I mean, it was absolutely pandemonium. All I saw was a need, a huge need. I knew my EMT guys. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were immediately going into rescue mode. They were taking care of business. The police officers, right, they're immediately trying to do traffic control. Everybody's overwhelmed. We only have so many firefighters. We only have so many EMT. We only have so many. We have a river that's now backing up and flooding a whole nother town and cutting off this other one. I mean, it was all hands on deck. Everybody. And then there's so many other people trying to show up and help. Somebody needed to step in the gap and say, how can we fix this? What can we do? Somebody needed to direct it, right? So although you have a city emergency management, you don't have it for some of these smaller towns. So those of us who had skills, right, business owners, right, we stepped up. I was a teacher, I was a coach for many years. A bunch of my students showed up. We started putting them, okay, you're on sandbag patrol, and you're on this, and you're on this, and you're on this. We started directing people. So when other volunteers showed up, okay, we need you to go over here, find some food, get it to these people. We need you to go find blanket, you know, and you just start directing. And in doing so, it allowed us to continue to create the resources necessary. People want to help, but they don't know how. It allowed us to help in a way that was constructive and productive. I couldn't have done that. It didn't just end that day. It was a 3-year process. 3 years of working with these families and trying to help them and help our community heal, and ongoing billions of dollars we funneled through to get to the right people and get to the right places and get things done. That never would have happened had the other moment not happened and I could not put that technology in my business. And then when I had this moment and I'm like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to be running this business. I want to be doing this. I want to go to all these disaster areas and help storm victims recover. I want to be able to do this. So then it pivoted my business again. How can I put my business up for success so that it can keep running itself and I don't have to be at the helm? That changed a whole lot of things.
Wow. Wow. I mean, some very powerful stuff. And there's a lot of really awesome things to unpack there as well. One of the things that I want to ask you personally about is, like, with the shifts that you've made in your business and the situations that you've begun putting yourself into, I feel like you've had to get much more accustomed to stress. And that's kind of one of the things I want to ask you about, coming from, a younger entrepreneurial mindset here, where some of us haven't really been through any of these like big monumental moments yet, where we really aren't even in the world yet to like know how a lot of these things work. How can we kind of come into one of these situations and manage our stress well and, make sure that we're doing the right things in those times?
So it's such a great question. Such a great question, because stress is a dangerous thing. It can be a driver, it can be a motivator, it can be a killer. And so if you don't have that balance of good stress versus bad stress, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but it can be if left unchecked. And so when I was teaching, I've always had to work. So I've always worked opposite so I could be with my kids and I could be flexible with my kids with all my businesses and different things I did. So I've always had a lot of stress, more so than the average person, because not most of the others would just be parents that are working. I was running a business, right? So it's a different level of stress. So I learned early on, you have to find what motivates you. So for instance, I needed downtime. I needed downtime with my family. I needed downtime for me, which looks different than with my family. Okay. So I planned once a year, every January, I planned a weekend getaway for me, just me, whatever I wanted to do. Sometimes that would get together with my siblings, no spouses, just siblings. Other times it was me going up in the mountains and just being alone, no cell phones, no anything. Other times, 3 times of the year. So every quarter I was planning a 3-day weekend or a 4-day weekend. I would always plan a time where I was getting together with my family and it was just family time. No phones, no agendas, just family time. And so then we would look forward to that time, right? We'd talk about, where do you want to go? You know, our time's coming up. Where do you want to go? What do we want to do? And then you spend that time planning and talking about it and building it out. And you learn this when you're a parent with kids. It gives them something to look forward to, but we're just grown up kids. That's all. We're just in bigger bodies. So I love to have fun, and fun comes in so many different forms and fashions for me. So for me, it was always, hey, what are we going to do? It's going to be Christmas break. What are we doing? I always planned a big snow trip at Christmas break. I'd gather up a bunch of neighborhood kids and we'd go hit the mountains and we'd learn how to snowboard, or we'd learn how to, we created our own sleds with cardboard one time. We'd go hiking and snow sled shoeing and different things, you know, whatever it was that, hey, I got a couple of these. Can we do something with these? You know, and we set up, we did a, what do you call those? Military ration things and such. But when the military goes out and they do like an exercise where there's like no technology, no anything, and everything's on your backpack kind of thing. There's a name for it. Military people know it, but I don't. And so we did that a couple times with the kids, you know, different things, and just different things to find that we can connect, but that was not business. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was thinking about fun. And so I would have those to push towards myself, right? Something to push towards. Sometimes it was I remember the first time being able to take a week-long vacation. So looking forward to that week-long vacation. And the first time, like 3 days of it, I'm thinking about the business. It's like, this sucks. I don't want to ever do this again, right? So I had to figure out ways that I could contain my stress, but still do that. So first was finding something to look forward to help motivate me. For some people that may be, you know, food treats or a new dress or whatever. I mean, it looks different for everybody, a new video game, whatever. The next thing I had to do is I have a ton of energy. If I cannot get that energy out, it's a bad combination, especially with my electrical thing. So I found that at least 3 days of the week, I have to be doing something either in a pool, in a gym, something. So if that's, I love playing basketball and volleyball, things like that. I haven't been able to play like on a team or anything like that, but for a long time, but just getting out and just getting active 3 times a week, huge for me, huge, life-changing on my stress level. Then I realized it wasn't necessarily the fact that I was doing something, it was the fact that I was getting out, changing the trajectory of my brain for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it was that I set aside. So then I started scheduling once a month, all day physical activities. So one Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, I would go, I love hiking. I'd go out and I'd grab some of my friends and we'd go hiking. And so I would, again, schedule, I had to be very purposeful about my time. So instead of always saying to my friends, no, I can't go, it's, hey, I'm planning friend day on this day. And I started calling it that. Hey, it's friend day. Who's coming? This is what we're doing, and being purposeful. So you have to find ways, again, to find something to look forward to, be purposeful about your time, who you're spending it with. So it's not just flippant, like, hey, you want to hang out? No. What purpose is that? Right? But if you have the time, great. If you don't, no, I don't want to hang out because I've got da-da-da-da going on, but I'd like to on this day or this time. Will that work? So they don't always feel like you're just saying no to them, but instead you're giving them an option. So it's also part of the stress relief for me. It's cutting out the drama. I have a lot of drama in my family. Jerry Springer's family is nothing compared to mine. I've literally even had some on his show. So it's a ton of drama. So when my family was nothing but naysayers, nothing but antagonistic, negative Nellies. So, like, I have no support whatsoever from my family. Absolutely none, including for a long time, my husband. He fought me tooth and nail in the business. He was like the worst instigator of it all. In my home, I thought I was going to have a heart attack so many times because of the stress he put on me. And it was because he didn't understand what I was doing. It made him nervous. And he had all this negative people in his life and in his world. She's never around. Why are you doing this? Blah, 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 blah. Right. And then getting his mind to go down a track that it shouldn't be, instead of spending that time focused with me, learning, no, he's spending time with all those wrong people. So my family were those wrong people. And I had to be very, very picky about when I chose to spend time with them and what that time looked like. It wasn't like, oh, do you hang out? Nope. It was very intentional. Hey, we're gonna come to see you for 3 days this time, or it's such and such's birthday or something. We can't make it for that one, but we're gonna be here for this one. I had to be very, very particular and limited. We got to where we had a 3-day limit. If we were all getting together for some event or whatever, my husband and I both learned 3 days max, because the negativity and the downward spiral was so bad. And so once he started seeing that for himself and recognizing that, it's like, okay, yep. And he fully agreed to that. So now we just had to really limit who was beneficial for us to be around and who wasn't, because we found not a lot of our friends, but some of our friends weren't really friends. They were just using us for whatever they could get, not necessarily. It wasn't a two-sided friendship. And once you start doing that, those friendships tend to fall away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can relate pretty heavily to a lot of different things in the story that you just told. My family's also a busy one. There's always something going on. I feel like with my story more directly, what I deal with isn't necessarily negativity. It's just that they don't see what I see. They don't exactly understand what I'm talking about or what I'm trying to achieve. And that even comes down to like my girlfriend, to a sense, like obviously we're not married, but like the next closest person to you, in a way, that like I'm obviously in business. I want to go into entrepreneurialism. I want to do things this direction. She came into school wanting to go be a doctor. Those are two extremely different tracks, where I tell her all the time, I was like, in business there's like a million and one different ways to get from A to B. To be a doctor, there is one way. I mean, obviously, like, there's different tracks, but there's still a very clear cut path of the things that you have to achieve and, like, do well on. Obviously, there's different testing and things, but like, there's a very clear track of what you need to do to get from here to here. And it just doesn't work that way for me. So there's a lot of different times that, like, I won't say we get in arguments, but it's just little things, because we come from two very different worlds and mindsets, to where it just doesn't exactly mesh, just because we understand things differently. We process information and things differently. And I feel like I very frequently have a lot of voices around me that are trying their absolute best to help me. It is always coming from a good place, but they don't see things the same way that I do. And I mean, another quote that I kind of like to follow is like, you like become most like the 5 closest people around you. And I mean, my circle in pursuing this journey has gotten a lot smaller. So I'm really only closer to like my girlfriend, my family, who happen to be the people that don't exactly understand all of this stuff. Like, not that that's a bad thing, but they just don't see it the way that I do. And I mean, one of the things that I preach on here all the time is that people aren't going to see your vision the way that you do. But like, when you have those voices around you that are kind of constantly saying something different, it is extremely, extremely difficult to find yourself and your own voice, like see the forest through the trees, if you will, just because
100%.
there's so much noise.
So our circle had to change. So some of those inner circle people got moved out to that next circle, and our inner circle had to change. Not because they were bad people or ill-intentioned people, but because they didn't understand. Now, some of those people have worked hard to understand and they've come back into the inner circle. But the others, when we get together, we don't talk about business, and they'll always stay in that outer circle. They don't have any interest. They don't want to even try to understand me, right? So therefore, they're going to be in this other. But that also meant I needed to get people around me who could not like support me. There's a difference, but build and edify me. And sometimes building and edifying me came at a price, came at a cost. So we joined key mastermind groups. We got around entrepreneurs that had done some things that not even necessarily the same things, but have done some things, started gleaning what we could, and figured out, okay, I don't want to spend more time with this person, or I do want with this person, and just keep exposing ourselves to more and more different people. And now one of the groups, every year we just committed to, okay, we're going to be a part of a mastermind group every single year. And some years it's been multiple years with the same group. Other years, nope, this group's only lasting this year and we're moving to another group. And that was because you're going to go through seasons, and those seasons are growth seasons. So sometimes you'll grow, like trees, they have seasons of growth and they have seasons of dormancy where you're just implementing it. You're not growing, you're just implementing it, and you're just building up strength and energy so then you can exploit the growth again. So during those seasons, you always need to be evaluating who's around you and who's influencing who you are, because it's not the intention that influences people. It's the words they're saying, even in the nicest of voices. You know, how many people you see, oh, you're such a good doggy, and they talk like this, right? And then, you're such a bad doggy, I can't believe you're such a stupid dog, and they're still talking the same way, right? It's how the message is delivered. It's what the words are that are being delivered. It's not the intention behind it, because people don't know what they don't know. So I couldn't teach myself something that I had no idea what it was. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we're still figuring out what our vision is along the way, and our vision is expanding. And you can't have someone speak into that who's very short-sighted and only sees this or only sees this. And so if that's who you're surrounded with, that's where you'll be. And you're going to lose a whole bunch of forest for the sake of the trees.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that speaks so directly to some of the things that I'm going through currently. Just like I said, I have a lot of well-intentioned people around me, but they don't have the vision where like their minds have not been expanded to see like the different possibilities that I do. And it's not necessarily that they're narrow-sighted, it's just that they've never been exposed to the different things that I've had just to even be able to see it. And I mean, it's just, how would you say, like, you know, to anybody out there who might be having any similar issues, what would you say to them as far as like, you know, like these are people that care about you and they want to help you, but they can only help to a certain extent because like your journey is different than theirs. And I mean, some of us, like me, myself specifically, are on a journey to be something very different than what they know and what they've grown into. Not that there's anything wrong with what they have, but I just want something different. What would you kind of say to that person as far as like prioritizing your own vision, but while also not necessarily wanting to become distant from family?
So one of the things that one of my relatives, who I was very, very close to, said to me, and it hurt when he said it, but I get it now, because he's also an entrepreneur just like I am. He said, Bethany, the first way he said it was, you're just too much right now. I can't handle it. The next time he had better words to say, and the words that he said to me resonated. He said, there is so much energy that you put off that it's literally exhausting to me, because my brain is focused on all of this, and in his words, I was like a giant distraction, right? It was a totally different direction, and it was this huge ball of energy that in his world was demanding time, and he felt like it was a pull away from what he was trying to accomplish. And it was like, oh, okay, no worries. Once he explained it to me the first time, it just was horrible. I mean, it just felt like a sucker punch to my stomach. So then when I had those times where family felt like they should speak into my life, right? When they had no idea, they've never ran a business, they have no idea what they're talking about. And they're like, oh, you did such a better job on that video. You're whatever their next comment was, which first off, they have no idea about video. They have no idea what I'm doing. And they have, I mean, it's like, what opinion, why would their opinion matter? It doesn't, right? So it's one of those times where I learned to nod, oh, thanks. And then I immediately changed the subject. Every time I did that, they didn't catch on. Now they catch on. Because what they've learned is unasked for advice is unheeded advice, right? And so I'm not asking for their opinion. Did I bring it up? No, they're the ones bringing it up to me. Now, in their mind and in their world, what I'm just trying to be helpful, that's great. Why don't you talk about something you can help with? None of which did you just offer, right? And saying that to them is pointless. So you have to redirect them. So when I redirected and kept redirecting, they figured out, okay, she doesn't want my business advice. She doesn't want my, and then I directed them to whatever I did want from them. Oh, how are your kids doing? Or, oh, did that, whatever happened at work for you today? Whatever it was that they had value for me, or what that connection piece for them, and redirected it to that.
No, I mean, I think that's powerful because you have to, like, I think that comes back to a lot of different things that you've mentioned already, just about being intentional, where you have to like be able to recognize in the moment that, like, if you're going to start going down that path, this is not going to serve me in a way. Like, I know that's different for just a conversation rather than like an experience, but you can still recognize the fact that, like, maybe they're asking how the business is going. Well, I can say, something that isn't necessarily saying, I want your input. Like, there's different ways to kind of do that, but you have to kind of be intentional about it and be able to recognize that, like, where, like, what you say, like, directs the rest of this conversation. Either I can make it that it's passive and we can talk about something else, or I say something that sparks conversation from them, and then I get their input, and then it's just exhausting to me because they don't understand in a way. And then you're in your head the whole time going, no, that's not how I feel. No, that's not how this works, whatever these things may be. And then, but you're not saying any of them out loud because they're just trying to help, and you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And it's just, so you nod, but at this time, like, it's become like, it's already snowballed into this thing. So now it's weighing on you. So, like, just being like intentional about that directly from that conversation, I think is just such a powerful thing that somebody can implement and avoid that. I mean, like, because it's obviously, like, I can't necessarily say obviously, but like, you don't intentionally want like anybody to be upset, yourself, them, or anyone. So, like, taking that into that conversation allows you to talk about the things that you mutually can discuss and that you mutually care about and want to talk about. So it just makes more productive conversation for both of you, but also there's not like as much of an emotional tether to it, to where it's not something like if you talk about like sports, if you have like a relative sports team that you both enjoy watching or something like that, you can talk about that much more lighthearted than you can talk about your business. Because especially somebody that is trying to start a business or has like plans to in the future, like, you can pretty much understand how, like, when you start your own business, it's kind of like your baby. Like that is something that's very near and dear to you. And if somebody talks bad about your baby, you're gonna get mad. You're gonna defend your child. Like, I mean, in a way, I can't necessarily say too much to that because I don't have children, but like, I can still understand where that comes from, as far as like you're going to want to defend your family. And if that's something that you heavily care about, there's that emotional tether, like I was talking about. And just being intentional in that conversation can allow you to make that a much more smooth interaction than it potentially has to be.
For sure. And that's funny you mentioned the sports thing, because in the beginning I wasn't so good at it. So I would always be like, oh, how about the Yankees? Because my favorite all-time team is the New York Yankees. And so I'd be like, oh, how about the Yankees? So that was a big joke. If Bethany's bringing up the Yankees, change the subject.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's so funny. Like as they start catching on. I mean, and eventually like it just gets to a point like that. And like I like the examples that you've made, just because like, like eventually they caught on, but they're not like angry about it. Like, I mean, like obviously I don't know them, but like they understand that like you don't want to talk about it beyond that point. And now they say, oh look, well, let's just talk about something else. And then you can just segue into that easily. It's not this big like before it gets to some boiling point that, somebody spouts off something that they don't mean. And then, the spiral begins because you've reached a point that you're like, I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this right now. I don't want to talk about it. And then somebody gets hurt. But like, because you were intentional about that, you're able to save all of that.
Yeah, and they're just trying to have conversation with you. They just don't know what to talk about, so they just ask a flippant question, not knowing how you'll respond or how, right? So it's just a matter of, like you said, being intentional, because if we're not intentional, it can spiral the wrong direction. And that's just, it's what you do with life. It's constantly going to be throwing a curveball. Are you going to try to swing, or are you just going to let it pass? So sometimes it's a matter of letting it pass. It's not the right time to swing, right? Other times it's the right time to swing. And, oh, are you really wanting to learn? Oh, no, you're not. Oh, okay. So that was a strike, right? And then you move it along, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do know we are getting ready to wind it down here, but I do want to just throw one more question at you before we do that. And just to go off of like basically the analogy that you just made, totally on the spot here. But like, what would you say to someone who may or may not be in a similar situation right now, where like maybe they're faced with some type of opportunity, whatever that thing is? How can you kind of assess that and say like, is this my pitch? Is this the one that I'm swinging for? Say we got a full count. I don't know, like say that like this is an opportunity here that you kind of have to make a choice whether or not to swing. Continuing to go off the analogy, what would you say to, maybe somebody in my shoes right now? Like, I'm still currently a student, but there's something kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word here, but either way, there's an opportunity here that we are trying to make a choice of whether or not to follow said opportunity. What would you say for advice on how to assess that?
So as you go through life, you will find so many times we're always like, well, what do you like? Well, what do you like? Just do what you like. Half the time we don't know what we like. And you always find out what you don't like. So my theory and my mentality is always try everything. Try everything once. Because at least if you try it once, you know if you like it or you don't. But you don't know if you never try. And so many times we miss great opportunities. Like I never set out to be a teacher. That was never in my world, in my space at all. It wasn't even on my radar. And when I became an interpreter, I started having the opportunity to teach. I had no idea how much I liked teaching, how much I loved connecting with people and seeing those light bulb moments. But had I not been willing to try something that was totally out of my sector, I had no experience, no anything, but I was willing to try it. Every time I've stepped into a situation and been willing to try, it's not always a good thing, right? Sometimes they're bad, but I learned, hey, I don't like that. That's an emotional drain for me, and I hate it. I don't ever want to do that again. But I would never have learned had I not done it. So when we give ourselves the gift of learning, we will make better decisions. So each time now, just like all my different team members that I've hired through the years, there was a terrible boss in the beginning. It was a horrible boss. I am much better now, and I'm hoping to be much better down the road. The more better I become as their leader, the easier it is for them to do their job, right? So the first people were so frustrated, right? Because I wasn't a very good leader and I had to learn. So that meant I had to try new things. I had to try this, I had to do this, I had to do this. And then figuring out what my superpower was. Everybody's always like, well, what do you like to do? I don't know. I like to do all kinds of things. But really figuring out what really empowers me and impassions me and gets me fired up and gets me out of bed when I'm exhausted. What is that? So many people said, oh, Bethany, you just love real estate. No, actually, I don't. Real estate's just the tool. I love people. I love connecting people. I love providing opportunities for people to learn and grow. I love creating sustainable growth. That's what I love. That's what gets me fired. That's what gets me going. Not one and done. That's why flipping and hated flips. It's just horrible. I hated it. But I hated it for a different reason because it seemed pointless to me. Kind of like as a mom, we're always doing the dishes. It's like it's a never ending job. You get it all done, it looks so great, and then in 2 seconds it's all dirtied up all over again. So you feel like this is an unending job. It's never feeling productive. For the dad that goes out and paints the house, well, look at my great job, right? There's this reward factor. We don't always get that as moms. So when we stop and ask ourselves, what do I like? And people try to say that, should I do this opportunity or should I not? If there's kind of a thing, does it go against your moral compass? The answer is no. Okay, then that's like my first one. If it doesn't go against my moral compass, I'll move to the next one. The next one would then be, if it doesn't go against my moral compass, what is the purpose of it? Is the purpose big enough for me to invest my time, energy, or resources into? If the answer to that is yes, then I'm moving to the next one. What is it going to cost me? Because every opportunity costs you something, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's resources, it's going to cost you something. So once I know what it's going to cost me, am I willing to give that for that purpose? And if the answer to all of those is yes, it's an opportunity for me to check into and maybe sometimes set a time limit on, because some opportunities, they can go on forever. Other opportunities can be very finite. So just recognizing that. So that's what I use. Everybody is different, but that's what I use.
No, I love that. I mean, I think it's just a very clear way to say, like, what does this represent for me? What could this represent? I mean, and literally, like, you can sit and write that out if you need to. I mean, I've found the pros and cons list can be useful, just like simply like putting it all down to where you can look at it piece by piece and say, here's what this offers me, here what it will cost me. I mean, and you can just weigh that to you. And like you said, I mean, obviously you take your own moral compass into effect and you say, is this like looking at these two choices here, the pros and cons, like, is this something that I willingly would do? And I mean, if that answer is yes, then obviously jump in. If not, then no. So no, I think it's a really powerful way just to look at it. I mean, and it's like it's just one of those things that seems so simple, but like if you actually take the time and sit down and do it, like the answer becomes a lot more clear than just sitting here like mulling over it in my head until my, brain's completely numb, and then you're not getting anything done and you just wore yourself out and round we go. But no, seriously, thank you so much for being here today and being willing to come on to the show and share your perspective um, and your experiences, of course. One last question I always like to ask the guests is, if you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself during that ground zero moment. I know you've mentioned a couple different ones today. You can take your choice. But if you could have a conversation with yourself during that time, what do you think you would tell yourself?
This is only a moment. Get up. It won't last forever.
I think that's so powerful. It really is. I can't add anything to that. So
I mean, it's so many times we think the moments are going to last forever, and we just need to remind ourselves it's just a moment. It'll pass. This too shall pass, right? So, okay, move along. Time to get up.
you hit it right on the head. And honestly, I think it was pretty much exactly what I needed to hear right now. I know this wasn't a coaching call, but it worked as one. So thank you so much. Seriously, thank you so much again, just for sharing. Before we go, could we just get the best place for anybody who is tuned in today to follow up and get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So if you want to actually make contact with me, you can reach out to me on my LinkedIn, just Bethany Finch, or my business one, American Made Home Solutions. I do have a YouTube channel, American Made Home Solutions, and I have so many 5 years worth of free value-packed information on there, everything from short-term rentals to multifamily investing to getting started as an entrepreneur, just tons and tons and tons of information and videos on there. And we are in the process of really ramping that up so it's more searchable than it is, but so much value on there. So definitely go on there, subscribe. I do new videos every single week. Every week I'm putting out new stuff, and so you don't want to miss out on that. So that's a great way and opportunity there as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. You guys heard it here first. Reach out to Bethany if she was able to connect to you in any way after today's conversation. Always remember, guys, this is Dream Chasers Ground Zero, and there's nowhere to go from here but up. Thanks, guys.